Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist worldwide.
I am so looking forward to this show today, which is really just a series of one-on-one conversations between me and people who are not atheists. These are conversations between myself and people who doubt, people navigating their way out of religion, or perhaps they're just navigating their way around this label of atheist or atheism. The whole show is that, and I think it's going to be hugely entertaining and compelling for you. Just a quick heads up on next week, I get the honor, and I've been working on this for a while. I've been trying for years to get, as my guest on the show, Dr. Eugenie Scott. And she is one of my heroes. I am such a fan of her and her work. I mean, a quarter of a century of work. She is a former anthropology professor. She's the former executive director of the NCSE, the National Center for Science Education. She has won a ton of honors and awards like the Public Service Medal from the National Academy of Sciences and the first Stephen Jay Gould Prize. And she's the author of a book called Evolution versus Creationism. And she has been out there just fighting the fight against intelligent design and creationism. You know, this pseudoscientific, anti-scientific nonsense being pitched by creationists. And if you want to get the vibe of how effective she's been, the Discovery Institute and Answers in Genesis just can't stand the woman. This alone should tell you something about how effective she has been in speaking out against these notions of intelligent design. Well, she's been touring with a speech called Race, Science, and Society. And I just found it so compelling and so fascinating and so interesting. I asked her, please, would you be a guest on my show? It would be my honor to have you. And she was totally game. So before you know, she ran off to the next thing on her very busy day timer. We locked down a date, and she's going to be my guest next Tuesday, Dr. Eugenie Scott. Coming up in December, we're doing a show on religiosity and law enforcement called To Protect and to Serve. If you're a cop or former cop who can speak to the expressions of religion that might be against the law, like, you know, taxpayer-funded stuff. I'm not talking about like a personal expression of faith, but when the police force itself is being religious. Do you see that? How do you see it? What's it look like? How does it manifest itself? We're going to talk about that. I want your perspective on that. If you're working as a law enforcement officer and you can't speak out publicly, send me an email, request to remain anonymous, and we can omit any specific details that might sort of out you and put your job in jeopardy. But I want to know, what are you going through? Send me an email to podcast@thethinkingatheist.com. Okay? For today's show, let's just get into some discussions, shall we, with people who are, for a variety of reasons, not atheists, or maybe not wanting to use the term atheist, who are navigating their own journeys and want to talk about it here with you and with me, okay? On the switchboard, I've got Kim. Kim, thanks for being a part of the conversation today. Glad you're here. What's going on?
Not too much. How are you?
I'm well. I am curious if you are an atheist. Are you a non-believer? Are you on the fence? Where are you at?
I'm a non-believer, but the atheist word kind of scares me a little bit. So
atheist. You're an atheist. Kim, you're an atheist.
I like to call myself a humanist.
You don't believe in any God anywhere?
No.
Atheist. Okay, I'm just saying, right? But I understand that you have an aversion. You don't really care much for the label. Why is that?
I'm from a very small town in Pennsylvania, just outside of Amish country. And that word, it's just kind of, it's looked upon as, evil. Just, and I don't like to box myself in as just being a non-believer. I like to say, I don't know what happens next. I don't really worry about it too much. I'm just, while I'm here on earth, I want to be a good person and do good things. And then whatever happens next happens next. So, that's why I like to say that I'm more than just a non-believer.
I get that. I mean, atheism declares what I don't believe. Although
Right.
I think our rejection of gods or the ideas of gods can inform how we approach everything else. Like my atheism can inform the fact that I'm addressing many of the claims and beliefs in our culture a certain way because so many of those claims and beliefs are religiously informed. But you're saying atheism, it's what I don't believe. Humanism is what I am about. What I'm curious about, Kim, is do you not like the term because it doesn't describe you or because it's loaded? Because I heard you say something a second ago, like, where I'm from, it's a toxic kind of word. Did I get that right?
Yeah. I mean, in my own head, I understand that I believe the same things that atheists believe. But yeah, it's just, I don't like to me, it sounds negative because that's what the kind of reaction that I've gotten, like in high school, I kind of came out and said like, oh, I'm an atheist. And it was just like, oh, evil. Like, and, I was told by many people that meant I was going to hell. And, to me, it didn't really bother me too much because I don't believe in that. But yeah, I more like to say, I'm trying to do good here now. So I think that I like to focus more on what I do believe in and my values and morals, more so than just what I don't.
If David Silverman, firebrand atheist, president of American Atheists, if he heard us speaking now, he'd probably get in his car and he'd drive to your front door, pound on the door and say, hey, Kim, we got it. Because he's one of those guys who's like, use the word all the time, everywhere you go, normalize it, show people it's not a negative. But I understand your position that, it's not a good fit for me. I would rather frame what I am as someone who doesn't put their focus on the supernatural, but on the natural, the physical, the real world, human beings helping each other good for its own sake. Is that a fair representation of where you're at?
Yeah, definitely. I like to, do what I can now and what I can control and focus on that and not, buy into stuff and worry about things that I have no control over.
Well, it must be said there are a lot of atheists who aren't humanists, some proudly so. And so I think humanism is a wonderful and worthy label. It's a worthy way to frame our lives. So thanks for sharing your perspective for the broadcast, Kim. Much appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
On the switchboard, I've got James. James, thank you so much for joining me. It's great to have you, my friend.
Thank you. It's great to talk with you.
I'm all about personal stories, and I've been listening to so many of them over the years. I get emails from people who are sharing little pieces of themselves, and talking about their own journeys into the faith, out of the faith, into another faith, into atheism, or, at least a place where they're doubting and looking and going, hey, where am I? You sent me an email, and your subject line was, my journey from faith to doubt. And so I wanted to just talk for a few minutes about your journey and find out what the story was. So what's your deal, man? I mean, what kind of faith have you been doubting recently?
It comes right down to the very existence of God. And I've pretty well come to the conclusion that I don't believe in God. I'm not to the point where I would say there is no God. I absolutely know that, but I seriously doubt that. But my journey started with a very cult-like, strict evangelical church, the Wesleyan Methodist Church. It's in the Midwest, and they're very, very strict, very, like I said, cult-like, a lot of rules, do's and don'ts, and no.
It's funny, cult and Methodist are not two words I usually hear side by side, man.
Yeah, well, this is not to be confused with United Methodist. Totally different denomination, different ballgame.
So they're telling you how to live in very specific ways.
Absolutely. God was basically this almighty smiter, angry. If you screwed up, he was not happy and let you know it. Everything that you could imagine was a sin from TV. We had no TV. If Christmas fell on Sunday, we had to wait till Monday to celebrate it. Women couldn't cut their hair. No rings, no makeup, no jewelry. The list just goes on. It's nauseating. It just goes on and on and on. And a lot of hellfire and brimstone. And their answer to that was altar calls, which they did frequently after a hellfire and brimstone message. And the problem was they taught that once you receive salvation, accepted Jesus, whatever terminology you want to use, that if you sinned, you would lose your salvation and be headed right back to hell. And it became a vicious cycle of sinning, going to the altar, getting saved, accepting Christ, sinning, losing, and just on until finally I finally just said, the heck with it, and ran from God and religion and church and faith starting at about 16 or 17. And that led to I started drinking, and that eventually led to, I got became addicted to pills and alcohol pretty bad, actually. And it was at the end of that, when I started looking for help, that I came back to God. Not the God of the Wesleyan Methodist, but just God as I understood him, which was not very well, but and surrendered to him as I knew it to be, and went to treatment. And then from there, that led to a more of a still evangelical Christianity, but it was non-denominational. And that led to, I actually became a pastor and was a pastor at a drug and alcohol treatment center for 6 years. And it was during that time, the last half of that time, probably the last 3 years, that I really started entertaining the doubts that had been lingering for a long time about God and about the Bible and the existence of God and the goodness of God. And I was actually doing a session, pastoral counseling, with a patient who asked, why would a loving God send someone to hell? And that, I can remember, that was like a turning point. I spouted off the same BS that, God doesn't send anyone to hell. You send yourself by rejecting Jesus and so forth and so on. As I was saying it, it felt so forced, so fake, so hollow.
It's like you're excusing an abusive parent or something, he really does love me. If you could only see him on his good days. He really is a beautiful person, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. And I thought, wow, that's a really good question, actually.
You mentioned the altar call scenario. That rings a bell with me. I think I wrote in my book, I said, repent, rinse, repeat. Because it was always a resetting of the board, always taking the dry eraser and, trying to get a clean slate for the next day until you sinned again and you had to go back and throw yourself at God's mercy.
His mercy only lasts as long as your inability to not sin lasted, which for me was not very long. My sister would do the same. She would, the rinse and repeat, as you say. And the ladies of the church would gather around and pray with her. And they would say, Libby, are you willing? And she would say, yes. And they would say, are you willing to give your life to the Lord and go be a missionary? Yes. All right, to a foreign country. Are you willing to get married and have your kids in a foreign country as missionaries? Yes. Are you willing to allow the people in the foreign country to kill your husband and kids? She said, no. And they said, well, then you're not ready. So
You're kidding. Really?
No, that's exactly what they told her. And that's the insanity that we grew up with. It was just absolutely insane. And I sent you a chronicling, if you will, of my story that led to the demise of my faith. I don't know. I know it was kind of long. I don't know if you had a chance to read any of it or not. But my father was not only involved in this church and one of the, I don't know what, Sunday school teacher and so forth and so on, but at home he was very abusive. So there were all kinds of issues that arose out of that with the strict religion, the abusive father, the insanity of the rules and so forth and so on. It was madness.
You and I both studied from the ACE program when we were kids, the PACE.
Yes, the PACEs, yes.
It was like a homeschool curriculum for me, but we actually used it in a private school. But it was terrifyingly bizarre and strangely ignorant and wrong-headed on, I mean, the science book itself is just a travesty.
Yeah, it was more, I refer to it as more like Wesleyan Methodist 2.0. The paces were worded to be almost like Sunday school lessons as opposed to actual school lessons and homework.
It's a book loaded with leading questions. I mean, they're all leading you toward the theological answer. They're sort of these weird affirming things that pat kids on the head rather than challenging them in any meaningful way.
They definitely have their agenda.
All right, you're a pastor for how many years?
I was a pastor for 6 years. I was a pastor at the treatment center. I wasn't a pastor. Well, over time, I did become a pastor, one of the pastors at a local church. But the majority of my pastoring was done at a drug and alcohol treatment center.
May I ask what led you into addiction? I mean, was it depression, something else?
Sure, absolutely. It was. I mean,
you share as much as you want, bro. I mean, I don't want to.
Yeah, I'm very open about it.
Okay.
It was. I mentioned briefly my father being abusive. It was physical abuse, certainly, but what was even more damaging was to my psyche was the emotional. From as young as I can remember until I grew or left home, I would hear all over and over, "You're worthless, you're stupid, you'll never amount to a hill of beans." And that gave me the message, I'm not good enough. And then that was solidified, like I could never be good enough for God because I sinned and had to start the whole process over again. So that was the underlying foundation basis for my addiction, was the depression and the hating myself, so just severe self-loathing. And one thing led to another. I started drinking. First time I drank the equivalent of a 12-pack and got drunk off my ass and loved it. And from then on, there was never enough. And of course, over the years, you got worse and worse to where by the time I went to treatment, I was drinking just an ungodly amount, 2 liters of vodka a night and a handful of pills. And of course, the depression just kept getting worse along with the addiction.
Did the idea of God help you in that way? We did a show about addiction recovery and
yeah, it did. At the time, I thought that it was, like I said, I surrendered to God at the time. Went through the 12 steps and actually went through the 12 steps twice and thought that I was relying on God and he was helping me. And so, at the time it did help. And I did believe back then in the existence of God, and that did help me stay sober. But now it's, I've come to the point where, like I said, I doubt seriously. I don't believe there is a God. And that hasn't affected my sobriety in any way.
Are you rattled at this moment in your life? Are you thinking, whoa, hey, what?
You mean currently or
right now? At this moment, are you looking around at your environment, at the beliefs you once held dear, and the fact that these things are falling away?
Question. Yes, I refer to. I just watched Julie Sweeney's Letting Go of God and absolutely loved it. Could relate to quite a bit of it. But there are some things that I'm still processing, still realizing in a life without God. I think for me, the most difficult one was realizing, oh shit, there is no heaven, because Ryan, my son and only child, was killed in a car accident at 22. And he was a Christian. And so I always had the hope that, he went to heaven and I'll see him again when I go to heaven. So realizing that's not true, I'm never going to see him again, has been really, really difficult. There are things that I'm still fleshing out, still realizing, overall though, I feel really at peace. There have been a couple changes, significant changes. One is I have a lot more peace than I did even as a Christian, even as a pastor, because there is not this deity in the sky recording my every word, thought, and deed, and, acting accordingly. And I don't have to live my life in a way that is what I think is pleasing to him. That doesn't mean I'm going to go rob and murder and whatnot, but I just don't have to have that. I don't have that hanging over my head anymore. oh shit, I looked at that girl and lusted. I'm going to have to, he saw that. I'm going to have to make that right with him now or whatever. I don't have that. So I have a lot of peace in that regard. And then I was, for the last year or so, I was really angry at God because according to Christianity, there is that aspect to him that is like the song they sing, he's a good, good father. And he provides and he takes care of us and this and that. And I have been through I've had a lot of loss. 20-year marriage ended after I got out of treatment and got into a relationship, got engaged, and that ended before we got married. And so being single is probably my biggest struggle, I guess, right now, is just being single. And I would always hear other Christians, other pastors say, well, God has somebody for you. It's just not the right timing, blah, blah, blah. And so I realized I had all these expectations of God. He's going to provide for me. He's got somebody. He's this, he's that. And I just got to the point where when none of this was happening, and because of so much loss, I just was so angry at God. I mean, it was just a simmering, seething anger. And as I started letting go of God and realizing at first I thought one of two things about God. Either he does not exist or he's not a good, good father and said he's an asshole. And as I started to work through that and realize that, I realized that at the same time that anger was dissipating and got to the point where it's gone. I don't have that anger because of those expectations that I was placing on God, that because he's a good, good father, because he's loving, because he's your friend, yada, yada, yada. I had those expectations, and when they weren't being met, then therein lie the anger. And remove those expectations, remove the belief in God, and I found that the anger is no longer there.
Many of us come out of the faith pretty rattled, It's like seeing the world with fresh eyes, It's
absolutely, yes, that's a good way to put it. Absolutely.
And you're not afraid of it. You're not afraid of death. You're doing okay.
No, I'm doing okay. There are times, I will admit, where I'm like, it just out of the blue, it'll hit me. Holy shit, what if, But then I go to common sense, and common sense overrides the emotion of fear or the emotion of that panic.
Well, I'm not trying to push you in any direction, man. I mean, I'm just asking questions. Sometimes labels help us define things, but I mean, are you an atheist? You an atheist, man?
I'm currently reading through Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, and how he has the 7. I forget what he calls them now, as far as defining. Yeah, the degrees of
belief. Yeah,
I would say I am a 6, which is I'm not going to say I absolutely know there's no God. To me, I don't believe that's been proven. I don't know, maybe eventually we can, but I would say I'm a 6. I strongly don't believe that there is a God.
If I may, for the audience, I'll just give everybody the list. It's listed on a Wikipedia page under the spectrum of theistic probability. The 7 are this. 1, you're a strong theist, 100% probability of God. You know God exists. 2 is de facto theist. There's a very high probability, but not quite 100%. I don't know for certain, but I strongly believe and I live my life as such. Number 3, you lean toward theism, higher than 50%. I'm very uncertain, but I'm inclined to think there is a God. 4, completely impartial. 5, leaning toward atheism. 6 is a de facto atheist. Very low probability that there is God, but short of 0. I don't know for certain. I think it's very improbable, but I'm going to live my life on the assumption he's not there. And 7, being the strong atheist, I know there is no God. And so you're a number 6 on that list, on that scale.
Yes.
I don't think I ever phrase it as no God can exist. I just phrase it as I see no evidence to believe it, therefore I don't buy it.
Exactly.
There's no God does not exist because he has not yet been proven. Prove him to me tomorrow, and we'll talk about it.
Right. Yeah, that's where I'm at now. There have been especially in early recovery, there were a few things that happened. One in particular that happened that I'm still wrestling with, to be honest with you, because if and it falls under, Richard Dawkins' book, he's reasons people give to believe in God, personal experience. And there is something that happened that, taking God out of the equation totally, I'm left kind of, how did that happen? So I'm still wrestling through that. But that, the evidence of God not existing overwhelms that, to where that that doesn't keep me believing in God, or doesn't cause me to continue to believe in God, but it does cause me to say, how do I explain that?
Well, James, I think there are a lot of times in our lives where we have to give ourselves permission to say, I just don't know. Like, I don't know how this happened. I can't explain this. Let's explore it. Let's try to discover it. But even at the end of the day, if we can't find the answer, let's not cheat. Let's not make up an answer. Let's not fill in a blank simply because we're uncomfortable with the blank, right? And that's an easy trap for people to fall into. I've fallen into it many times in my life in belief, when I would just say, God did it. It's so complex, I can't get my head around it. Must be God. I don't know is kind of a liberating thing to say when we really don't know, and I think it's the most honest approach.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I also have a funny analogy of letting go of God. It's kind of, to me, it's similar in some ways to that crazy uncle some people have that shows up to holidays and gets drunk and just ruins everything and just makes everything hell, and then leaves, and you're relieved and glad he's gone. But at the same time, there's something you can't quite put your finger on, that something, even though it's not very significant, there's something about him that you miss, even though you're not quite sure what it is. And that's kind of how it's been in this early letting go of God stage.
Anybody around you looking at you funny? Hey, man, what's happened to James?
I've told a select few. Ones that I think everyone I've told is a Christian, but they're open-minded enough that it won't affect the friendship, or it won't significantly affect it. I've been picky about the people that I've told. I haven't changed my Facebook status to atheist or anything like that, and I don't know. At this point, I'm not going to. There may come a time when I will, but
I think that's up to you. You frame it any way you want. Are there any questions you have about non-belief as you navigate this road? Is there something that, bugs you or kind of been gnawing at you at all? I don't know if I have the answer or not, but I'm pretty wired in.
Yeah. No, I can't really think of any specific questions or anything that's really been bugging me. I'm still reading through a lot. I've got several books that I've read both of your books, and like I said, I'm reading the God Delusion, and I have The End of Faith by Sam Harris, Letter to a Christian Nation by the same, and Christopher Hitchens' God Is Not Great. And
well, the God Delusion is, and this remains probably the first book I recommend to people, because it was so instrumental in my own life. People in your position, people who are sort of navigating or have just navigated out of the faith, it's a masterpiece. It is so well produced. It's so well written. It is an amazing book. And I've read a lot of books by scientists and apostates, ex-pastors, what have you. There's something about the God Delusion that has made it one of the best sellers. And there's some other good stuff. If you're getting into the science of evolution, Jerry Coyne's Why Evolution is True is great. And Dr. Donald Prothero has a book called Evolution, What the Fossils Say and Why It Matters. We actually did a video speech based on the book that's on YouTube. You can find it. He lays waste to the book of Genesis and the creation account, And there are so many wonderful resources out there online for people, I think, who are where you are. So if you ever feel like you're losing touch with people who get you or who have your back, trust me, they are out there, and they would be eager to be able to connect with you if that point ever came, okay?
Thank you. I just actually connected with Life After God group on Facebook. One of the administrators of the site actually went to the same Christian school that I did. So
wow,
he's younger, but quite a bit younger. But he went to the same school, and he's now identifies as atheist, and he and I were actually chatting a little bit before you called.
Well, if there's anything we can do for you as a community, I mean, I'm right here with the social media group is right here. We have a great forum at thethinkingatheist.com. There are a great many people online who can, I think, provide you a sense of community that if for any reason you were to lack it in your own life, you can find it elsewhere. Any final thoughts or anything else that's going on with you, or are you doing all right?
I'm doing all right. Looking forward to life without God. Looking forward to the lack of the fear, the shame, the guilt. Those are things that are good things to not live with. And as you know all too well, religion and faith, they use those as motivators. Fear and shame and guilt are the biggest weapons in their arsenal. And I'm looking forward to. I'm already enjoying not living with those, and looking forward to actually connecting with the community, as you say, more. I was looking online for some support groups in the area. Haven't found much yet. I'm in Boynton Beach, but I'm looking, Florida, that is. And so I'm still looking for some support groups to connect with. But yeah, I'm looking forward to life without God, life without faith.
I'm reminded of that quote from Gandalf when he frees Theoden from the possession in, I think, the second Lord of the Rings film, when he says, "Breathe the free air, my friend." That's how I feel about you, man. James, breathe the free air. Congratulations on your own journey. I think ultimately we all just want to live honest lives, and if God proves himself, herself, itself tomorrow, we'll start there. We'll figure that out. We just want to live truthfully, okay?
Sounds good, yeah. Thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate your time.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you, my friend.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Let me take a short break. When I come back, we're going to have a conversation with a listener who uses hula dancing as an expression, a spiritual expression, honoring various gods, and yet she did so and has done so embracing Christianity. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk to a devout Christian, or until recently, a devout Christian, someone who in the last just a series of weeks, has really come to a point of critical mass. He's married to an atheist. He himself, well, he's on a journey, and he's going to tell us about that journey. That is coming up after this. Hang on. I've been wearing prescription glasses for years. You know, anybody who's seen my publicity shots or me on the road doing speaking engagements or whatever. I mean, I wear glasses, but what you may not know is I also wear contacts quite a bit, especially at the house and on the tennis court, stuff like that. I mean, I can't wear glasses out there on the court. And so while I'm out and about driving, that kind of thing, I like to wear contacts. I was not a big fan of the process of contacts, mostly because it was just a pain. The annual eye appointment, you got to renew the prescription to get the contacts. And then I discovered Simple Contacts. It's an app. It's not a replacement for your periodic full eye health exam, but Simple Contacts does let you check and, if necessary, update your prescription for contacts with a 5-minute online vision test. And it's the real thing, right? It was designed by doctors. The results are reviewed by licensed ophthalmologists, with Simple Contacts allowing you to renew your prescription and reorder your brand of contacts from anywhere. Like, I took the exam on my cell phone. No kidding. I had the delivery of my brand of contacts, which is Bausch & Lomb. I had them in my mailbox in just a few days. Boom! Absolutely done. No driving, no hassle. You can enter your own prescription. You can do the quick exam. You pick your brand, including options for astigmatism, multifocal, colored lenses. You save time, you save money. The prices are unbeatable. The exam, $20. Free shipping with Simple Contacts. They have rebates available. HSA dollars can be used by the end of the year. And even better, my listeners get $30 off their first order. Just go to simplecontacts.com/Seth Andrews and then enter the promo code, which is my name, Seth Andrews. $30 off your first order. Thanks to Simple Contacts, your phone or your computer is now your window to a better contact lens value. So check it out right now. Simplecontacts.com/Seth Andrews. Promo code Seth Andrews. hugely thankful for my show sponsors on this broadcast and also those who support me on Patreon. And if you'd like to be a Patreon supporter, you get a commercial-free broadcast and a bonus show every month. Just log on, and you can choose the terms of your patronage at patreon.com/Seth Andrews. This broadcast, we're talking about people who aren't atheists or don't want to call themselves atheist for a variety of reasons, for a host of different reasons. They are not, or say they are not, atheists. On the switchboard, I have Lehua. Am I saying it right, Lehua?
Yes, you are. Great job, actually.
Say it for me to make sure I'm getting the music of it right.
My name is Lehua. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for being a part of the broadcast. We're talking about, doubts and a little bit about labels, how we frame where we are in our journeys. May I ask you where you are in your own journey?
Yeah. So I am a spiritual agnostic at this very moment. I am native Hawaiian, in case you can't tell by my name, and I have a lot of cultural spirituality. So dancing hula, for example, is very spiritual to us. And in dancing hula, we are giving praise to Heiaka, who is the goddess of dance and music. We also have a lot of our songs are about Pele, who I don't know if you guys know any Hawaiian mythology, but that is the goddess of fire and our goddess of lava, basically. So all of those things are very spiritual to me and also something that I really believe in. And I attended Catholic school from kindergarten to 12th grade, and I just automatically thought I was a Christian with some heritage spiritual beliefs. But about 2 years ago, I started dating this amazing guy named John, who is a devout atheist, which doesn't really make a lot of sense when you say it like that. But he made me question a lot of different things that I was thinking, what I was believing, and 2 years now have gone by, and I don't think I'm a Christian. I attend church a couple times the past couple of weeks, and, they were praying instead of doing, actual things to help people. And I just, it's not for me anymore. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Okay, well, I don't want any of the questions I present here to ever feel like it's not an attack at all. I'm just curious. So if something comes out of my mouth wrong, please know my heart and intent. Fair enough?
Oh, totally. Not a problem.
Okay. So you are a Christian. You have been a Christian in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But how long have you been, I don't know, is the word worship or honoring Heiaka or the goddess of lava? Do those two jive together, Christianity and all these other traditions?
Heiaka is like the goddess of hula. Lava is Pele. Pele is goddess of fire. Yeah.
Okay.
So in Hawaiian spirituality, a lot of Hawaiians see themselves as Christian, and in their beliefs, when we are dancing or worshiping these different Hawaiian gods, we see God, like Christian God, as being the many faces of Hawaiian deities, if that makes sense. So we all have one God, but they have different names. So Pele or Heiaka or who is God of war. Like all of these different gods in these Christian hula dancers' minds is still our God, but just takes a different form due to our heritage. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm working through it.
Sorry about
because
that.
At first blush, it sounds like you're making idols that are not Yahweh, Jesus, Jehovah, right? And so thou shalt have no other God before me is the first thing that comes to my mind. But you're saying that in Hawaiian tradition, it's an expression of your honoring of the Christian God in some way.
Yeah, that's how some people see it, and that's how some people view it. And I personally was just like, yeah, whatever. It's God, it's this, it's that. To me, it was just trying to connect with the ancient art that connected my ancestors to me. And I know Christianity often says, you will not worship any other gods, but, I attended Catholic school where there were statues constantly everywhere. And we would pray to Mary while facing a statue of this Virgin Mary. And is that not the same thing, I guess? In my mind, that would kind of be so I guess that's kind of how I justified it. if that makes sense.
Lehua, can you tell me about the word spiritual? What does spiritual mean to you? Do you feel like you're connecting to a spirit or to a spirit realm?
Yeah. So spiritual to me is honestly being in nature, is being in this beautiful place that was created, whether by millions of years of evolution or just being in some sort of other realm, perhaps. I'm not really sure how to describe it.
Well, let me see if I think I'm getting the vibe. So let me sort of articulate what I'm hearing, and you can tell me how close I am, okay, to the bullseye.
Okay. Yeah.
So in your mind, you don't get hung up on whether or not there was a grand designer with a capital D, whether there was a Big Bang almost 14 billion years ago, or whether there was some other cause or creator or some other origin story. For you, it's more about the celebration of being alive and actively involving yourself in a culture and a tradition that sort of provides a framework for your human experience. Am I close?
You hit it exactly on the nail. I wish I was as eloquent as you. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Take away everything that I just said and just repeat everything you did, and we'll be on the perfect page.
I have the gift of the gab. You know, when I was in the church, I used to say, that's my spiritual gift. I have the gift of the Well, like there are many atheists who use the word spiritual to talk about the transcendence. They're connecting to nature, to each other, the events of their lives that seem almost beyond language, beyond verbal description. These are spiritual moments, the birth of a child or falling in love or, seeing a sunset, seeing Niagara Falls, those types of things. That's spiritual to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And by dancing hula or by doing anything that is of my culture brings me closer to that spiritual realm. So it's not a physical place. It's maybe it's a state of mind. As oh my God, I sound like I'm tripping on drugs right now.
No. I actually that makes it, you sort of connecting with yourself, expressing yourself as an individual in the natural world actually makes more sense to me than if someone had said, I dance hula to actually speak to Pele, the goddess, or Hayaka, or who, I'm not sure. Which one's the hula god that would be related to the dance? Or either?
Iyaka.
Okay, Iyaka. All right. You don't think Iyaka is like I don't want to put you on the spot here. You don't think necessarily Iyaka is like hanging around somewhere, like someone, something you could talk to, you could pray to, you could jive with. It's more of a concept that helps frame the cultural act of the hula dance.
Yes, exactly. And just as a heads up to your listeners, if you meet a Hawaiian, please don't ever, the first thing that comes out of your mouth, say, oh, so do you dance hula? Can you teach me how to hula? Because that's not something that any old person can teach you. They have to take years of training and learning the language and speaking and probably close to 20 years of being able to be immersed in that culture. So yeah, that's a very sacred thing to us. And it's by me dancing, it's not speaking to someone per se or speaking directly to the goddess. It's just tradition. And I think there needs to be some sort of boundary for that, to let people do their thing and do what is sacred to them without being kind of a jerk about it, That's kind of happened a lot.
So it's an insult to you then if someone's like, if they're glib or flippant about hula dancing. Oh, I'm in Hawaii, let's go hula dancing.
Yeah,
I mean, that's like...
It's kind of insulting, yeah, because it's not just waving your arms and swaying your hips. There's meaning in every little part of it. And Hawaii was originally taken over illegally in 1892. I believe. And it is, to a lot of people, hula almost died because it was outlawed, it was banned. Our family was not able to speak it. My grandfather was beat in school for speaking Hawaiian, and so he refused to speak it to and teach it to his children. And in the 1970s, there was a huge hula revival trying to bring it back, because if we didn't have that revival, we wouldn't have the hula that we have today. And so it is kind of insulting when people ask, just kind of, let's go to Hawaii, let's go to a luau, let's see this hula, because hula is not just for show. It is how we connect to our kupuna, or to our ancestor. And so, yeah, that's kind of...
You don't have to worry about anything from... I will never... First of all, I haven't had hips in about 15 years, so I don't really have the tools with which to insult the hula. I'm just saying. Okay?
It's more like... it's more like going to a hula show and then trying to, like, dance and, like, kind of make a mockery of it, you know?
I would never do that to you. I promise.
You're fantastic.
Appetites would be lost across the islands. It would be just, I would be the stuff of legend and not in the best sense of the word. What I'm hearing from you, though, and we hear a lot about this from secular Jews and people who are participating in, they have... these cultural frameworks, and they want to keep alive the traditions, this beautiful tradition that has been part of their family and culture and heritage for so very long. So even though they don't believe in gods, and it sounds to me like you are an atheist, it sounds to me like you don't believe in gods, but you really do want to connect in every way possible with the real world, and you just use spiritual language to color that. Am I close?
You hit it on the head in ways that I could never articulate. So thank you for...
Yes, you could. You're a great communicator. What I was trying really to do, I hate to, I don't want to throw a label at you and be like, you're this. But when I hear you say, well, I'm an agnostic, what I hear is I'm atheist. Like, to me, I don't know means I don't believe, right? Agnostics are atheists, right? If you don't know, then you don't hold a belief, therefore you are atheist. I don't get hung up too much on that stuff, believe it or not. For a guy who hosts a radio show called The Thinking Atheist, I don't flip out or get hung up on people who even use the word spiritual, if that word is a good word for them, because they are simply using that language to describe how they connect with being alive. I mean, it's a little problematic when we're communicating to believers sometimes, but I totally get where you're coming from, right? You just want to keep what has been beautiful in your life and region. You want to keep it alive and promote it for the generations to come, and then use it as a way to maximize every moment here on this earth. Yeah?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
How do we, if we were looking for the hula dance that wasn't just something done for the tourists, I realize it's a minefield out there, but I mean, if somebody was like, well, what does real hula dancing look like? Where would you send us?
So if I were to send you to anything, it would be the Merry Monarch Festival, Merrie, Merry Monarch Festival, that is held every year in Hilo, Hawaii, which is on the Big Island, and it happens every April. And it basically is the Hula Olympics. So that is the best place, I think, you will get to see real Hawaiian hula.
Not to keep you too I'll keep you another minute here, but
you're fine.
Like, if I was to say, hey, Lehua, you're an atheist, I mean, does that make you feel weird?
It kind of does, because I want to work in public policy, and I fear that the term atheist will automatically make me a godless communist, or whatever the hell the term is. And it makes me a little uncomfortable, and I think I need to maybe learn how to embrace it a little bit more. But let's be real, the atheist community is a great community, but with every great atheist, there is an equal and more terrible atheist out there that will post things like that will make fun of believers. So it's a hard line to cross.
I get you. Well, I do. I understand completely. I also understand that it's a game of chess for a great many people who are navigating their lives, their families, and careers I like to see the word used whenever appropriate, but I also like the fact that you are proactively describing what your life is, and you're coloring it with all these beautiful things. And if that's how you choose to frame it, I'm going to get crucified by many in the more sort of hardcore of my listening audience. But I think if that's how you choose to frame it, I think that's absolutely fine. I think knock yourself out. Wonderful. I'm glad you found your place in the world, and I wish you all happiness and success in your endeavors. Last question, real fast. I've never been to Hawaii. And I'm terrified that I'm going to end up in the wrong place and it's going to be so kitschy and touristy. I want to see Hawaii. Okay. If I come, I want to experience Hawaii, not the gift shops in Hawaii. Where would I go?
Okay. So basically, the entire island of Oahu, which is where I'm from, that's the one that has Waikiki and Pearl Harbor and Honolulu, and it's the most populated. It has 1 million people on the island. It's like 52 miles across. It's ridiculous. It takes hours in that traffic. Stay away from there.
Okay.
You should be going to basically any neighbor island, and maybe if you get a couple of people and kind of do an Airbnb or vacation rental, it gets really cheap and it's better than staying in a hotel. Because when you're in the hotels, you don't have access to a kitchen, you're cramped, and it's like ridiculously expensive.
You are terrific. Lehua, thanks so much for sharing your perspective and being a part of the broadcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
On Skype, I have Casper. Casper, you are on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. How's it going?
Quite well.
Where are you calling me from or Skyping in from today?
From Denmark.
Are you an atheist?
I wouldn't describe myself as an atheist, no.
Why not?
Well, the short answer is let's see, I don't really like to identify myself as an atheist. Primarily because of the interactions I've had with other people identifying as atheists, and because this whole "we can prove there is no God" thing it rubs me the wrong way.
Okay, atheism being the lack of a belief in God. Well, that's different than saying I can prove that no God does or could exist.
Sorry.
Right?
That's sort of the thing, right? Because, like, to me, that the lack of a belief in God just says like I can't believe in God because it's not rational to believe in God. But I don't see a belief in God as any more rational than a non-belief in God, if that makes any goddamn sense.
All right, wait, hang on. Let me make sure I'm tracking here. Let's go back to the first part of the comment. So for you, someone saying, I don't believe in God, do you think that's the same as saying no God exists, period, or can exist, could exist? Do you think those are the same?
No, but you gotta understand, like, in atheism, there is this whole thing about you can't just say, like, I don't believe in God, because there's always the follow-up, like, why don't you believe in God? And the follow-up will always be, because God doesn't exist. That's the easy way. I've never met an atheist who doesn't work that way. I've never met an atheist who doesn't, like, follow up that thing with, well, God doesn't exist, therefore I don't believe in God.
Well, what if you and I were talking like we're talking now, and I said there's no evidence to lead me to believe that God exists? Would that fly with you?
See, yeah, definitely. That's a way more nuanced answer than I usually get.
Okay, but the people that you're dealing with are saying because he doesn't exist. And, yeah. I mean, I agree with them. Right. Like Santa Claus doesn't exist. The Tooth Fairy doesn't exist. We don't start with a belief in unicorns and then ask people to disprove unicorns. These are old arguments, but they still work.
Yeah.
But you are not a believer in any God anywhere. Is that accurate?
That is very accurate. Yeah.
Okay. You're an atheist. I have had this conversation several times on the show.
For the sake of making it easier and predefining everything, and yeah, sure.
I see a pattern. But I totally get it. You are sort of put off. There's a dogmatism to some of the people you've met who are atheists, and you don't want to frame your rejection of gods in that way. Is that accurate?
Well, I think it's more like, just as you said, there's no evidence leading you to believe in a God. I don't think there's any evidence that leads towards disproving God completely. I think the entire question whether or not there is a God is a completely pointless question to begin with.
Why would it be pointless?
because it really doesn't matter. What matters is the interpretation of what this God person is and who he is and what does he do or what does she do for that matter. You can say like, what is God? For me, the God is like obviously a man-made construct. It's something we invented to explain a whole host of shit. Just like you got like the thunder. With the early Scandinavians, they didn't know what thunder was, so they just invented a god who made thunder. Now we know what thunder is. It's sort of along the same lines, only now God is this weird concept to a lot of weird people. I don't know if that made any sense.
All right, well, let's talk through this, okay? So you're, even now, though, making a forensic examination of God claims. I mean, you're saying that it's a pointless question as to whether or not God could exist or does exist. But then if we're going to interpret these gods, where they came from, what they're supposed to do, perhaps they're man-made constructs that have provided explanations throughout human history, we are still then examining the merits of God claims, where they came from and whether or not they do bear supernatural properties.
That is very eloquently put. I think the reason why I think it's a pointless question is basically because like it doesn't really matter if there is a God or if there isn't a God. That doesn't matter. It's how we use that, let's call it knowledge. Like it's the expression of, let's say, the Christian God in the world that is causing a shit ton of problems. I don't know if I can swear. I
As much as you'd like, my friend.
Okay.
Just express yourself freely here, okay?
Fantastic. So the expression of the Christian God is causing a whole load of problems. Wouldn't you agree? Like, and the Muslim God and like all other gods, right?
Yes, I would agree. Yeah, you and I line up here for sure.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of problems, but that's not like, again, we're looking at like the expression of a God, like how people interpret scripture or whatnot. It's not like, I mean, if you understand my drift here.
Let me again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Let me see if I'm tracking though. All right. And you check me on this. Okay.
Yeah.
Would you agree, we can debunk specific God claims, gods with a proper name. We can go back to the origins of claims about Thor, Zeus, Yahweh, Jesus, Allah, whatever. And we can see either the lack of evidence to support or plenty of evidence against those claims. You know, if you can go back and make an examination of biblical claims about Jesus and the stories involving Yahweh and Jesus, and you can see that they are debunked by science, history, an overwhelming avalanche of evidence, we can then sort of take Jesus off the table, right? I mean, would you agree if someone makes a specific character claim, some specific God, that gives us something we can get our meat hooks on and we can go and check that out. Would you agree?
Definitely.
Okay. And so from the perspective that Christianity, though, remains the most popular religion on planet Earth, and it is proactively going after people, it is trying to infect the minds of the young and the vulnerable, it is trying to dominate public discourse, politics, it's trying to stamp its brand of ownership on morality, blah, 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 blah. The fact that religion by nature is so proactive, right? It's going after people. It is trying to go into all the world and preach the gospel and make converts. Then it does matter because it genuinely does harm people. If that God does or doesn't exist is a question that does have a point and should be asked. Do you think that has merit?
To a certain extent. If you could, like, definitely prove that there was no God, you would have a point there, but
I'm not talking about a God, though, brother. I'm talking about Jesus, Yahweh. Like a specific, I mean, the Christian God, something that has a holy book, they have dogma, they have very specific rules. It's a specific religion that we can check.
Sorry. I misunderstood your question.
No, it's all right. No problem.
Well, again, to a certain extent, because to disprove all that, you would, like, to definitely disprove it, you would need, like, something like a time machine, go back and say, look, there is no Jesus here. You said he would be here. He isn't here. And that would, like, suffice as enough evidence to the believer, I think, because no matter what, as the recent political climate around the world has shown, no matter how much proof you have for something, there are always people who will be there to point at it and go, no, that's not good enough. Global warming does not exist, and it evidently does. But
okay, well, you and I are talking about, I think, two different things. I'm talking about the evidence. You're talking about the biases of human beings, and they're both things that need to be discussed. Yeah,
and that's sort of like the thing. You can totally disprove, like Jesus, for instance. Like I personally do not believe that there was ever a person named Jesus. There's way too much evidence to support otherwise.
Okay, hang on. I want to stop you right there for just a second, and then you can continue. So,
yeah.
In regard to Jesus, after looking at the claims, the stories, the scriptures, you have decided Jesus does not exist. You are an atheist in regard to Jesus. Would that be fair?
Probably, yeah.
I do not believe in Jesus. I don't believe he existed. At least the God-man existed. You're an atheist in regard to Jesus. Would that be fair?
Yeah, probably, yeah. But
the word really bothers you, Casper.
Yeah, but it has such a negative ring to me.
Well, let's just go back to the dictionary definition, though. You know, the lack of a belief in God, a non-belief in God. I mean, let's take away all the other baggage, you know, all the politics and any, shitty atheist that you've ever bumped into in your life, okay? And let's get back to, what's the word actually mean? What is atheism? It's the non-belief in God. It's not declaring God does not or could not exist, although, I think any worthy God would have already demonstrated his, her, or its existence by now.
Yeah.
I know we can debunk specific deities, but for you, I mean, do you feel like atheism is a religion? I mean, I'm kind of getting that vibe. Do you feel like it's another form of religious exercise?
Well, yeah, that definitely. It has that sort of religious-y thing, but that I think that's more to do with the way that I interpret religion.
Well, how do you interpret religion then? I mean, paint the picture for me.
It's like a religion would be sort of any formed around the basis of a belief in something that might be irrational and disprovable, like fucking. Yeah, well, the belief in God is we have no evidence to say, like, look, God is over in that corner. We know he's here, so there you go. But atheism, to me, it sort of, well, it has that thing. It has that thing, right? And it has that sort of, I don't believe in God. I can disprove all of these biblical things, and I feel like it's looking. There's too much emphasis on this God question, whether or not God does not exist. Which obviously I feel like is a pointless question.
So if a cancer physician or a family member, loved one who had been affected by cancer in some way, their spouse, one of their children, a loved one had cancer, and they went out and they fought cancer, would they be obsessed about cancer in a religious way? By talking about it all the time, by dealing with it all the time, by focusing on the defeat of it, do you feel like they are religious about cancer?
I think that's sort of a leading question because I don't think you can quite put it up like that, because on one hand you have a question of a very metaphysical nature, like, is there a God? And we're engaging in all these, like, you did not do this miracle, whatever, your what you call them, faith claims. And on the other hand, you have cancer, which is very easily provable, and like, we can point to cancer. We know, we've researched cancer for a long ass time. It manifests in a very sort of outside the spiritual domain. One is like a metaphysical thing, the other is a very, very physical thing, right?
Well, if we were to look at them, though, as agents that cause a negative effect, okay? So if, the cancer goes into someone's body and it's eventually, it inhibits them, it debilitates them, it eventually robs them of their lives, we would be against cancer because cancer is, it's a deadly agent. It's diminishing people. It causes great harm and great pain. Now, I'm not trying to do a game of Twister on you. I'm talking about, can we say something like, religious belief that teaches that you don't deserve heaven, you are worthy of hell, that you were born with a sin nature, that many of the natural inclinations that you have, the feelings you have, those are all sin, that you should distrust science and scientists, that you should in many ways disconnect from the real world. I mean, these are harmful things. They harm people, right? I mean, we just did a show about how in very fundamentalist patriarchal religions, people use religion to diminish the voices of women. I mean, it's a harmful thing that damages people often for the rest of their lives. So if we aren't to speak out against it, if we aren't going to talk about God and God claims and these specific things, do you think there is another way we should combat it, or do you think that too is pointless?
I definitely don't think the sort of activism against these very negative manifestations of faith is a pointless thing. Like, we need to discuss women's rights. We need to be engaging the religious communities that diminish the rights of women. And children, like people who still round up gay people and kill them. I mean, that's straight up medieval, and we need to engage in a discussion to make those people stop.
And if they're tied, though, directly to a religious faith, how do we address them without talking about the God belief itself? Or should we then go back and say that, hey, you know, maybe we should be talking about, maybe it's not religious to try to treat and cure the cancer. Maybe it just means we are anti-cancer. We're fighting the cancer. Do you think there's any merit to that?
Well, I'm not so certain. Like, obviously, I don't have a huge frame of reference because I don't live in a society. I don't live daily in a society that has a lot of those negative religious manifestations. I mean, the worst we have in Denmark is like Jehovah's Witnesses and like
they're pretty bad.
Everybody hates them. Nobody likes those people.
Do you like them?
No.
Why not? Why don't you like them?
Half of my family grew up within the cult, so I've heard all the stories about how they operate from the inside, and it's horrible.
Damaging people, right?
Yeah, but then again,
with bad ideas.
Yeah, definitely. But then again, from going from there and then to like talking about religion in general as a negative, that rubs me the wrong way.
Well, do you think it would be fair then to go point by point, religion by religion? I mean, there are some people out there who practice even secular religions, and I can see people in my audience who are blanching at the moment, but they like a framework, a tradition/religion kind of a framework to add color to their lives. It's more of a cultural exercise for them. And we've already had those conversations in this show, and I think, fine, knock yourself out. I mean, it's one thing, though, to practice these things in a way that is, a colorful, sort of a cultural exercise. And it's another thing to use religious messages to try to control people. And I think that's where I go on the offense, because I want to see people not controlled. I don't want to see them infected with guilt and shame. And so by speaking out against it, I don't see me being religious because I am an atheist activist. I'm not speaking out against religion because I am participating in religion. I'm simply saying that religion's on the offense and has been for thousands of years, largely unchecked, operating under the umbrella of huge privilege, a different set of rules in many cases for religious people. And many of us are holding up our hands and saying, look, we think it's time to, number one, challenge these claims and say either prove it or shut up. and two, everybody else gets a seat at the table. You no longer get more. You no longer have greater benefit. You don't get special treatment just because you say you do. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. We may not be as far off as perhaps people assume.
Oh, I'm fairly certain we're pretty aligned in a lot of ways.
You're put off by the idea of atheism, or maybe organized atheism. Yeah, no.
Yeah, and that's obviously I have a bias because I've only ever met the aggressive as fuck atheist who will shout from the heavens like there is no God, and I live in a country where this debate about whether, like, we're straight up debating whether or not doctors should be allowed a huge beard because it's an expression of an evil desert religion. That's
you're shitting me.
Completely nuts. No, we have
you're having a discussion about whether or not doctors can have beards because
it was a part of an evil desert religion. The thing is that there are some pretty powerful right-wing parties in Denmark at the moment, okay. And they are very, like most of Europe, going very aggressively towards everyone who believes in, who adheres to the Islamic faith. And everything gets scrutinized. I mean, there are kindergartens in Denmark where they force pork products into their menus daily, like kindergartens funded by the state who are forced to serve pork because then they know that the Muslims will pull their kids out. Wow. It's this oppression thing that so what I see happening is basically that this sort of atheist thing about like the you want to sort of like, well, the aggressive atheists at least, you want to disprove God and you want to debate God constantly, and that feeds into this nationalist bullshit we got going on in the moment.
Okay.
Whereas I'm just, I think what I'm looking for is more nuance and more focus on trying to sort of mend the gaps rather than further the gaps. Because I see a lot of aggressive rhetoric, and I see a lot of, like, the other day, I'm fairly certain you're familiar with the Friendly Atheist on Facebook.
Yeah, he's a friend.
The other day, I saw a chart about, like, Americans or something where parts of them were complete atheists and others were spiritual. And the tagline for it was something like well done to the atheist, and sort of well done to the spirituals. You're not quite there, and the comment sections get nasty as fuck on that page.
Casper, let me stop you right there. Look, if we have a soul, and there is a soul-sucking enterprise on this planet, it is a comment section. All right. This is the nature of the internet. You cannot judge the merits of the work or the ideas by those who often populate, even suffocate comment sections. I'm not saying there aren't occasionally meritorious comments in there. There occasionally are, and good people. But the bad so often outweighs the good, or out volumes the good. At the end of the day, I sense from you that you're just tired of the asshole.
Definitely,
definitely. The in-your-face, ram it down your throats, religious people are stupid. I mean, it's not even really firebrand atheism. It's just a toxically angry, vitriolic, it's an imbalance where people have been so busy shouting atheism or there is no God that they may have forgotten a little bit of the fact that we're dealing and speaking to and about human beings. And you'd like to see more compassion in the equation?
I'd like to see more, more compassion, more understanding for the position of the other party in this whole debate thing.
Would you agree with me that people deserve respect, but ideas aren't guaranteed respect, that ideas have to earn it? Like, if I see you, we're, talking over coffee and you tell me the earth is flat, I can respect you as a human being, my friend.
Yeah.
But I can think that your position is just batshit crazy and makes no sense, and it suffocates in an avalanche of evidence against it, right? I can respect you as a human being.
Definitely.
And your right to hold an opinion, but I can also feel like the belief is just bullshit. And those two aren't contradictory. Would you and I agree on that?
Definitely.
Okay. So then if I was sitting across from someone who believed that we were created by a space wizard and our ancestors were a dirt man and a rib woman in an enchanted garden with talking animals, okay, I could love and respect you as a human being and value your ability and right to hold an opinion while also not respecting the opinion. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah.
Okay. We're not all that far off. And I think probably my final question here, and I got to move on in a second, but at the end of the day, beyond atheism, theism, belief, non-belief, whatever, do you think the question, do the facts matter? Does that question have merit? In relation to religion or God questions and in every other aspect of our lives, do facts matter? Is it true? Does that question matter in your mind?
It sounds really bad that I have to think about that.
Well, I was going to say the same thing, Casper. Like, is it true? Should that not be the guiding question for all humankind? And then if some religious piece of evidence arrives, whatever it is, if evidence for anything arrives, wouldn't we want to embrace the evidence because we're interested in living truthful lives? Beyond the atheism or religion question, do we want to live truthfully?
Yeah. I mean,
Casper, you're killing me. You're killing me.
Sorry.
You're killing me. I don't feel like it's a loaded question. Do we want to live truthful lives, or do we want to delude ourselves, allow ourselves to be deluded, or delude others with non-truths? And I think this is no-brainer, and I think that's my point, right? I'm not going to leave you here on the hook, my friend. Just something to chew on, all right? If the facts matter, if the truth matters, if evidence matters, and we want to live honest lives, then we do have to address the God claims, proactive God claims, and we have to say, is it true? And from that perspective, the questions about God, well, they do matter. They are important. They are part of the fabric of the rest of our lives and something we should probably take a hard look at. Think that's fair? It's something you might consider, at least, moving on?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else before I move on?
No, I think I pretty much covered. I've got things to think about now. So it was a productive talk, you know.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I just, I wish for you, I wish for me, I wish for all of us a truthful life. And I appreciate you having this conversation with me today. It's been great to have you, my friend.
Yeah, and thank you for talking to me.
On the line, I have Daniel. Daniel, thanks for joining me for the broadcast. Great to have you, man.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Talk to me about your own journey. I mean, are you, you going through something in your own life? Are you a believer, non-believer? Where are you at?
Well, I would say I'm kind of 90% on the way to not being a believer anymore. I grew up in a Christian household. My father is a Baptist minister. He hasn't been a pastor for a while now because of his health, but we did the whole church youth group. I was in Awana all the way through high school. I was homeschooled all the way through high school.
Now, explain Awanas for those who aren't familiar with the Awana program.
The Awana program is a church Bible program that runs, as far as I know, nation and worldwide. It starts in preschool with an organization called Cubbies. And then it goes all the way through high school with a group. When I was in it, it was known as AKX, which handled more apologetics and ministering and that type of thing at the high school level.
The training of young people to go out and evangelize the world.
Training, looking back on it now, it was significantly more indoctrination almost, teaching you how to explain things, defend the faith, the whole 9 yards.
To hear you use the word indoctrination leads me to think that at the very least you've parted ways with organized religion, right?
Yeah, I haven't been to church regularly since my first year of college. The college I went to was down in New Mexico, and the only services that they had on school grounds that we were allowed to attend, there was an Episcopalian service in the morning and a Roman Catholic service later on in that day. And I went one time, and having been a Baptist, the Episcopalian one did not sit well with me, and Roman Catholic was anathema almost from the way I was brought up. So I never bothered going back after that point.
Always funny to watch the denominations talk about each other. And then,
yeah.
Give me some reference, though. You said first year of college. How many years ago are we talking here?
Let's see. That would have been 1998, 99.
Okay. All right. Well, we're talking
to 99.
It's been almost 2 decades then for you.
Pretty much, yes.
Do you miss church? Do you have guilt about not going?
I don't have guilt about not going to it. I for a while after I came back from my first year of college, I continued to go just because my parents did. I tried getting into the college group that they had at the church, but it was very much the church they were at the time, it was very much a tight-knit group. And having been gone for a year, I didn't recognize most of the people there, and the people who were there were very much connected to each other. The only people I really had any interactions with were the ones that I recognized from the time before I left, and they kind of didn't hold a whole lot to do with me when I got back.
So you kind of checked out, and 20 years of, I think there may be a God, but I'm not really participating in the whole God discussion. You paint that picture for me. Where you been?
Well, I still believed. I just felt like I didn't fit into the into the church at all, really, anymore. When I did go to services during Sundays, I would go to the adult congregation courses, usually older married couples, and I'd be the only single person in the entire group with people in their 40s and 50s as a 20-year-old. Because my father was a pastor, and with the homeschooling that I had and a lot of religious teaching that I had on top of it, I felt like I knew more, and in some cases I did know more than the people that were sometimes teaching the courses. And it was difficult to be in that group because it felt like it was beneath me, for lack of a better term. But after a while, it was just, I can't keep doing this. I feel like I'm not getting anything out of it. So I kind of stepped away, did things on my own for a while, and then it's just became more of a, God and I are on our own terms. If I learn something, I learn something. I'm not going to particularly seek something out unless it's something that I want to learn or study on my own.
Daniel, do you talk to God? Do you pray or anything like that?
I catch myself doing it from time to time. Not as often anymore. It feels silly sometimes to think about that. When I was being taught growing up, my parents always drilled in, talk to God about everything. When we were younger, we would pray to find close parking spaces to the mall. And as I got older and we changed churches and I learned more, we became more kind of Calvinistic in terms of God has determined things ahead of time, prayer, you're supposed to do it, but it's all ultimately up to God anyway. So it occurred to me that prayer kind of is a pointless act. If God's going to do what he's going to do, then there's really no point in asking him to do something different. So it slowly died off on its own.
If you have kind of a Calvinistic background in that way, did it affect your self-worth? How you viewed yourself? We are all sinners. We're all unworthy of goodness in heaven, that kind of thing? Or
very, very much so. And that's something I still have problems with in terms of, if something goes wrong, I did something to deserve what's going on. And I've been to counseling. I've been told by people that I know that think that I probably should go more regularly because they feel, but I've been told that I have very severe problems with self-esteem, and I'm really hard on myself in terms of what I expect myself to be able to do. And it's difficult. It's harder at other times when I know like I should be better than I am. And I have to kind of mantra myself into the, I can only do what I can do. I can't be better. The only thing I can do is do my best. And if I know I've done my best, I can't do any more of it.
Anybody else in your immediate circle know you're going through this sort of journey of doubt? If you've had some problems and questions, you on anybody's radar?
The only person who actually knows anything about this is my wife. I've been married 11 years, and my wife is an atheist, which did not sit well with the family. I had two sisters that are both in the church. One is more supportive than the other. I have two younger sisters. The older one is more supportive. The younger one is much more like I would be if I was still in the church, very dogmatic and on top of things, and any kind of niceties or more lip service. I don't dare bring it up to anybody in my family other than my wife. And even talking with her, there are things I can't talk with her about because she doesn't know the background and didn't go through I'm 37 years old, and I've been, spent the first 20 plus in heavy, Christian indoctrination and being told what is right and what is wrong and how things need to be, and trying to extract myself from that it's not an easy thing at all.
You don't feel like you could sit her down and sort of paint the picture of your upbringing and what that culture was like? Do you think she would want to learn about those things from your perspective?
I know that she does. She has told me many times that she wants me to sit down with her and explain what I'm going through. And I've tried a couple times to start doing it, but as I get into it, it's hard to paint a picture of how much different what I went through, or what I seem I went through, was from what other people would say Christian upbringing was. My family was very critical on what we believed was the only right thing, to the point of, at one point my father even said that most people who believe they're Christian aren't actually Christian. And it's almost to the point sometimes that it was very much like the Phelps family, but never to the extremes that what they went through.
It certainly sounds like a Calvinist, all the other pretenders have watered down. They're living that sort of happy, clappy, love verse-based, seeker-friendly Christianity, but we're the real Christians. That's what your dad sounds like to me.
Yeah, very much so. And we left the church once because it was more strict than even he was comfortable with. And we've actually left several churches because he just didn't agree with the way the teachers were going. He didn't think they were close enough to what he believed.
Interesting, Daniel. I mean, I'm not trying to psychoanalyze the situation. I'm not really qualified, but we can talk like friends who've just met, right? I mean, you're not comfortable enough to be able to speak to your wife, but you and I are speaking here. Is it easier with me because I'm kind of a stranger, or, because the stakes aren't quite as high, or what?
I think it's easier because, I know your background. I know that your family, because of having listened to your podcast and seen some of the things that you have talked about the difficulties you've had with your parents and the things that you've had to go through with them.
Okay. How long have you been listening to the show then, in the shadows? How long have you been peering in the windows over here?
Probably about 3 or 4 months. I actually found out about you through stumbling onto Matt Dillahunty. And that was through stumbling on through YouTube. I came across a clip of him from one of the debates he did with Cy. And then
that's a maddening exchange, is it not?
Oh yeah,
that'll just flat push you over the edge.
And from him, I watched a couple of his videos. I found out about the Unholy Trinity tour, and then I found out about you and Aaron. And I've been jumping back and forth between the three of you, watching some of the different discussions and that type of thing. And I've been listening to the podcast for, I guess I would say, probably about 3 or 4 months now.
Well, it's an honor to be able to talk to you. I'm to be a part of your journey in that way. It's something I've always wanted for this show. You're at 90%. I don't think there's a God. There probably isn't a God. What about that last 10? And this isn't a setup, right? I'm just genuinely curious. You're right there, but you're not quite there. Can you tell me about that?
It mostly comes down to fear. Very much through everything that I grew up with, the devil is tricky, and he will say things that sound very convincing, and you can be almost convinced, and that grain of lie within a whole bunch of truth that would be enough to trip everyone up. And so I will go sometimes weeks and be able to have discussions with people and talk about not believing and seeing holes and cracks in the stuff I was taught growing up. And then I'll have a conversation with my family, or something will come up and it's right back to what if I'm wrong? Do I want to take that chance? And by default, that kicks me back into maybe I am wrong. Maybe I need to look at this again. And
do you sometimes feel like you're Sort of a feather in the wind. You're getting pushed back and forth depending on the people that are sort of whispering in your ear, and it's a little disorienting, or am I interpreting that wrong?
No, that's probably pretty accurate.
I'm not trying to say that you in any way are flaky or you don't know who you are, but I know the power of influence. And when you're surrounded by people speaking in very convincing ways with real passion, that verve, it just, a lot of times it can get you to talk to yourself, and then you leave and you go, hey, wait a minute, maybe I've got it all wrong. So I think that's the vibe I was going for. You go into an environment where people are like, well, who wouldn't believe in God? It's so obvious. And you leave and your cage has been kind of rattled, right?
Exactly. And other times I will go, or I have gone toe-to-toe with my parents when they have gone a little more extreme on things. And, I get done with that situation. I'm like, I probably shouldn't have done that. Maybe they're right. Yeah. And I haven't told them anything I'm going through with it, because I know just the kind of backlash that I would get as a result.
Well, families can do the backlash thing pretty well. Spouses, children, friends, cultures. Yeah, I totally understand. Is there something that's really bugging you? Like, is there anything you've always wanted to ask a professional heathen? Or did you just kind of want to share your story? Is there any way I can help you in your own journey, is my question.
I guess my question, and I probably know the answer that I'd get, but does it get any easier having been out of things and actually making a finality statement that I'm done, I'm walking away, I don't believe this anymore?
Well, I think everybody's journey is a little bit different, Daniel. I can tell you a few things. I can give you a perspective, and you can just take it or leave it. The first is this weird thing that we both heard in the church. Don't listen to something that makes sense that doesn't fit into the Bible, because the devil is tricky. I mean, I heard you talk about your own parents warning you. Well, be careful out there, because when they talk about things like, evolution by natural selection, sure, the evidence is going to look like it makes sense and all the dots connect, a physical, natural world operating by natural laws, but the devil is crafty. And I, in my own mind, had to come to a point when I expected God to make more sense than his arch nemesis, the deceiver. And in my own life, when I realized that God's explanations, the Bible's explanations, the church's explanations for all of these things, whether it's the origins of the universe or human morality, evolved ethical systems, for the basic scientific questions, the basic philosophical questions that we navigate, I realized that God made less and less sense the more I delved into the quote-unquote answers in Scripture and in the church. And I expect that many people came to the point where they were like, I need a God that does make sense. God in the Bible is supposed to not be the author of confusion. And yet, can we picture in our minds any character in fiction or nonfiction who has been more confusing than the Christian God? Every day it's like a Rubik's Cube you have to solve all over again. The apologists are out there, each one of them giving their own explanations for why this is and why that is and why this original Greek or Hebrew text was mistranslated and if you do this and that, and yet the apologists all disagree with each other. It's a trap that the church sets. It's a no-lose situation for them, meaning that they're always right and the evidence is always wrong, unless the evidence happens to align with them to begin with. They've started with the answer. Are you and I prepared to give ourselves permission to live a life where we don't start with the answer, but we just start to put the puzzle pieces together? We go tap on the glass and ask questions, and let's talk to the experts. Let's read some books that didn't come out of a Christian bookstore. Let's navigate the world honestly and just kind of see where the breadcrumbs take us. And any worthy God, any God worth worshiping, if he, she, or it exists, I think would welcome that. For me, it just became a moment of giving myself permission to say, well, I'm just going to go find out what's true as best I can. And if God ends up at the end of this trail, cool. If God's not, I need to be prepared to admit that out loud and give myself permission to live honestly. And if a God does exist that is asshole enough to make life a house of mirrors, a confusing place that's designed to make me go mad, and would send me to hell for getting the answer to an impossibly confusing question wrong, that's not the kind of God I would want to worship anyway. And I'll tell you, that went a long way for me. It still was a matter of time, though. It took me a few years to get over my fear of hell. Do you worry about hell? I mean, Calvinism is, they're huge on hell. Do you worry about eternal torment?
Yeah. On the times when I'm at the point where, I shouldn't go any further, that's one of the bigger driving things about it. And with Calvinism, because I don't know if it's consistent across all Calvinistic things, but within the denomination I was in, or the group I was under, it was very much a thing of God's already chosen who he's saving and who he's not saving. And you can't make the difference on that. So even somebody who might honestly want to believe and doesn't, if he hasn't picked them, they're not going.
Have you gone down that particular bunny trail? Why would God, who sees everything past, present, and future, implement a plan that he foreknew would, on several levels, fail, requiring for some reason the creation of an eternal torture chamber, and then God would predestine who is rescued and who is damned? Have you logically sort of gone through the hell question in your mind?
I have, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in terms of everything else that they say God is supposed to be. God is love. God wants people to be saved. He's calling people to him, and that is in total conflict with that.
Yeah, well, I usually hear he doesn't send you to hell. You choose to go to hell by rejecting God. That's how most people skate on the hell question. But, if you and I see ISIS burning a captive prisoner alive on the news, we see human beings, including Christians, and they are aghast, they're horrified. They can't imagine who would do this to another human being. But when you talk to fundamentalist Christians about a God that would torture forever, apparently burning to ash and then regenerating and re-burning to ash for all eternity, human beings, unimaginable torture, you say that your loving God is going to do this to, some of your family, perhaps your spouse, your children, your best friend, a coworker, whoever. They've compartmentalized, they've excused, they've rationalized, they've done a tap dance that somehow makes Yahweh still the hero of the story. But if you and I look at Yahweh, we give ourselves permission, rather, to look at Yahweh as we would any other dictator, ruler, king, tyrant. On moral grounds, we can assess that even if that God existed, that God would not be worthy of our worship. That God would be a sadist who would, for no reason other than his own pleasure, cause eternal torment of the damned. Hell, just annihilate us, right? Just wipe us out. Why torture us forever? Also, another point on hell that Matt Dillahunty, and you mentioned him, he's got a great line that I love to steal. I always try to give him credit. But, if someone comes after you with hell, have this discussion with them, Daniel. Look at them and ask them, if hell exists, how could heaven exist? If your mother and father are going to go to heaven to experience perfect and eternal joy and bliss, but you're going to go to hell and burn forever, and your parents had the knowledge that their beloved son was being tortured alive for all eternity, how could they then experience eternal bliss? It's a paradox. If hell exists, heaven cannot exist. And if they give you the answer that, well, God wipes your memory, then that's not you, right? You aren't in heaven. It's actually somebody else. And there are a lot of exercises like this that can help us get past the teachings, the dogma, the doctrines about hell. Mostly, hell is a control mechanism. Hell is a way for people to keep other people from asking questions. Hell is a way for the church to tell us we're broken, we're diseased, so that the church can then sell us the cure. It's just an amazing business model that has worked for thousands upon thousands of years. At the end of the day, it's hard to get past the emotions. It's hard to get past the decades of indoctrination. For me, it has been just an exercise in practice, in reading about the human origins, the human stories of hell, reading more about where the Bible books came from, or better yet, where they didn't come from. The fact that we don't know one of any of the authors of the 66 books of the Bible itself being a monumentally contradictory and immoral book. It is so problematic when it's not read like a love letter. Well, then, as the Bible falls away, so does more and more of our faith. As we see the historicity of Jesus and the quote-unquote fact that there was a Jesus and he was God, well, that falls away. Well, so does more of our faith. The more we surround ourselves with good scientific arguments and an evidence-based lifestyle, the more the faith and the superstition falls away. And as an exercise, for me, it just took a series of years, but I really found myself to the point where I was afraid of hell, then I was sort of afraid of hell, then it didn't bother me as much, and now I just think Satan is a great punchline for jokes. I've just come to a totally liberated point. Jesus jokes are funny, Satan jokes are funny. I'm liberated by being able to dance on the heads of the things that used to control and dominate me all the time. And I think that's possible for a lot of people. I hope it's possible for you. Beyond anything else, Daniel, your life and your journey belongs to you. It doesn't belong to your mom. It doesn't belong to your dad. It does not belong to the Calvinists. It does not belong to any specific church or denomination. You need to give yourself permission to live your own life on your terms. And I know we were trained in the church that our lives aren't ours to begin with, right? I don't have the right to say this is my life because it's not. It belongs to God. Daniel, this is your life. And I think my encouragement to you as a friend would be, it's okay. Give yourself permission to live your life on your terms, to give yourself permission to ask hard questions and expect really good answers. Be prepared to say, I don't know, or accept the answer from somebody else who says, I don't know. And don't let them cheat when they paint God into the cracks where they don't know because they're uncomfortable with not knowing. And beyond even that, I hope I'm not overstepping, I would take your wife to dinner, Daniel. Take your wife out, spend some time eye to eye, face to face, and paint the picture of your life for her. If she's an atheist, it would be my hope she's a rationalist. She's rooted in evidence and understanding and wanting to learn. I'll bet she's insanely curious about the things that inform your perspective of the world. And if she can be educated about you to learn what you went through, I think she can be more effective as a partner as you guys navigate many of these questions together. And then it becomes kind of a tandem thing where she's got your back and she gets you on that level at the same time. I don't know if that's something you're comfortable with, but I, as a pal, if we were having a beer, Daniel, I'd say, hey, take your wife out and tell her the things she doesn't get, make her get it. Paint the picture. Take her back in time to your youth. Give her that time capsule. I think she'll listen. I would hope she would listen. And then the more she understands, the better she can join hands with you as you guys take the journey together. Fair enough?
Absolutely.
My friend, I know it's not easy. Beyond that, I hope your life's a good one, lived on your terms, and something that you and your life partner can share together. Okay?
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Really enjoyed the conversations today. We probably could have gone an extra hour and a half if we wanted, or even longer. But we'll call it a day. I'll be back here next Tuesday as I speak to Dr. Eugenie Scott about race, science, and society. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.